Hello out there and welcome to Season 5 of Your Next Mission video podcast. Did you know there are over 1.3 million service members across all branches, serving including 450,000 in the Army? Our guest today wrote a new book called Boys in the Barracks that provides insights into the understanding of the military culture and that shared experience of our service members. It's called The Most Candid Description of the Army Life Ever Produced. Stay with us. You'll find out more about this great account of military life. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Your Next Mission video podcast, where we tell the stories of those who have served in the past and those who are serving today. From transition to financial wellness, VA benefits to mental health, we cover issues facing veterans, active military, and their families. Now here's your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army and co-founder of the American Freedom Foundation, Jack L. Tilley.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks to all of our veterans, service members, and families for your service to our great country. Now, before we get started, I personally want to thank our presenting sponsors, Navy Federal Credit Union, whose members are the mission, and Purdue Global, where you can start your comeback with additional sponsorship from Blue Cross Blue Shield, FEP Dental, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, FEP Vision, and USAA. Together, they make your next mission happen. They love our veterans and families, and you know, I'm going to say it, you've heard it before, I'm going to say it every week, we love them too. Today, we're going to be talking about life in the military and understanding the military culture and our soldiers' shared experience. And I'm excited to introduce the authors of Boys in the Barracks, Dr. Anthony M. Hassan, President and CEO of a Cohen Veterans Network, and Professor Carl A. Castro, Director of Military and Veteran Programs at the Susan Dworak Peck School of Social Work and University of Southern California. And before we even get started, I want to put my book up because you guys have yours right there. And I'm going to show my book to make sure you understand I've got a book also. Hey, before we get started, we have a lot to talk about today. And I want the audience to know just a little bit about you. And we was talking before the show even started about your experience in the Army and the Air Force. And I know you're both served in the military. And I know you're both was enlisted in the service too. And I love that. Would you tell the audience just a little bit about yourselves? And Dr. Hassan, I'll start with you, sir.
Great. Yeah. Well, I joined the Army when I was 17 years old and spent 11 years enlisted, made the rank of E6, and served with artillery and infantry units as a radio operator. Loved every bit of it, except the last couple of years in Alaska were pretty hard. So I decided I wanted to be an officer, and I separated, went to school, and came back in the Air Force as a mental health officer. I spent the last 14 years of my 25-year career as a mental health officer. People always ask me, Sergeant Major, like I told you earlier, they ask me, how the hell did you end up in mental health, Anthony? And I said, you spend 11 years in the Army, you'd end up there too. So I was able to help soldiers and airmen in my 25-year career, and I loved every minute of it, and I am who I am today because of it. So thank you.
I'll tell you that there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that. It's not an easy life, and I know that for a fact too. But the military, not just the Army and the Air Force, all of them, but the military changed my life, and it made me a better person right now. So, Professor Castro, you too. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you know, Anthony and I have a very similar track record. I also enlisted when I was 17 years old. And for all those out there who enlisted when they're 17, they know that mom or dad has to sign the paperwork to get you in. And usually it's mom who does it. And so my mother signed me up, and I went to, at the time, Fort Benning. Now we've got different names for all of our installations. And I made it to the rank of sergeant. I didn't make it to staff sergeant. But one of the things that I remember is the Green to Gold program. And I remember the first sergeant brought me in, and he said, Castro, you're going to become an officer. And I said, yes, first sergeant. And at first I thought, it was an accolade, a compliment. And after I became an officer, I wasn't so sure it was a compliment. But one of the things he said to me, he said, never forget what this Army's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
About the infantryman. and
Yeah.
don't forget where you come from. And
Yeah.
so that has stuck with me my entire career. The whole time I became an officer, during my time as an officer, I never, ever forgot what the Army is about. It's about soldiers and sustaining soldiers and taking care of soldiers. So that's always stuck with me. And that's why it was such a pleasure to write this book with Anthony, because we both come from that same mold of what's this military about, and what are, it's about soldiers, and how do we take care of them and make sure they get the most they can out of their military experience.
Yeah, we all three have something to call. I also came in at 17 years old into the service, but the difference was, I remember I told this story a little while ago. I was sitting on a beach and I was 17, just graduated 17 from high school, and I was drinking a beer. And somebody said, what are you going to do? He said, you're going to go to college? And I said, guys like me don't go to college. and so the second guy said, hey, you want to join the Army? I said, sure, why not? I ain't doing nothing else. So, I didn't even know they was fighting a war. So I went basic AIT jump school, and I went at the time straight to Vietnam. So it was, but again, going back to it, we all joke and laugh and kid a bit, but everything I did in the military, it just built on the foundation of my life and made me a better person. And it really allowed me to see a lot of things that I know so many people in our country don't see. I'd like to ask each of you, what inspired you to write? I think I already got that, but what inspired you to write Boys in the Barracks? I mean, Dr. Hassan, you want to start off, sir? We'll sort of go back and forth with both of you, but you can chime in anytime. Go ahead, Dr. Hassan.
Yeah, so, Carl and I were together at USC, and we were talking one day about a book written by Larry Ingram, and certainly Carl knows it better than I do, but Larry wrote a book about Vietnam era veterans and what their life was like when they came back, and the challenges they had with drugs and alcohol. And he really kind of lived that experience with them for a while and then wrote about it. And so one day, Carl and I were driving on Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos, and I said, let's go down Motor Pool Alley, and I want to just kind of reminisce. And so we were driving, and we looked over to our right, and we saw these combat soldiers. Obviously, they wore the right patch, so they went to combat. Who knows if they just got back or they've been back a month, a year, but nevertheless, they were combat veterans. And they were pulling weeds from between rocks. And I was like, holy cow, what must it be like? It's one thing before we went to war, pulling weeds from between rocks and doing all those crazy details, raking dirt and picking up pine cones. But after going to war, coming back, maybe having seen things, fellow soldiers have died, you lost your marriage, all kinds of things could have happened to you. And now you're back in garrison and you're pulling weeds from between rocks.
Yeah.
How do you manage those emotions? So I looked over at Carl. I said, Carl, we've got to write the Boys in the Barracks, what we call Boys in the Barracks book, and talk about the experiences of our soldiers who are now back in garrison, returning from war or preparing for the next war. And it really was something we wanted to hear firsthand from soldiers. We didn't want to assume. And so we interviewed about 150 soldiers, mostly lower enlisted, a few sergeants, and a couple of company grade officers to kind of appreciate what it's like today. And has it changed much from the time when we were young privates sitting in the motor pool, bored out of our minds? So we went on to talk about it. And Carl, please, add your portion to that as well.
The only thing I'll add to that story, which was beautifully said, it was also hotter than the Dickens in Texas on that day. So it was just about as miserable a day as it could possibly be. And for those who've been to Fort Cavazos or Fort Hood, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it's gotten better. But so that was the motivation and our passion for making sure that that's not the last experience that they have while they're in the military. And as you know, Sergeant Major, a lot of times when soldiers leave, they leave because they didn't sign that next contract. And there's usually a reason they didn't sign that next contract. And it's usually they're not in a good place mentally. They're angry. They don't feel they were taken care of. They were disrespected. So we wanted to really tell that story. What can leaders do differently? That no matter when a soldier leaves the military, they feel like their time was worthwhile. It was a great investment. And as you said, they're a better person. They've got a great foundation to build on for the rest of their life. That was the real motivation for doing it.
Coming out of Vietnam, I went to, I don't know what's your age. I'm probably older than both of you, I'm sure, but I came out of Vietnam in 68. I came out of Vietnam. So I went basic anti-jump school and went straight to Vietnam. And I was overran when I was in Vietnam, 20 wounded and 7 killed. And I remember coming back from war and the things you were just talking about, pulling grass and pulling weeds and doing all that stuff. And I really struggled about just fitting in. I've been out doing what, the military or our country asked me to do. And it was tough for me for a while. And I think just an extension of that, what's really hard is when you come back from war and then you get out of the service and you struggle to find your tribe or where you fit in. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know if I ever have. I mean, I talk, I communicate, I do everything right, but as I get older, I struggle a little bit. So it's not an easy solution. And I'm really glad that people like yourself are writing books and talking about this stuff because we need to. We need to talk about it. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
One of the things you hit it. One of the things that we talk about in the book, in fact, the whole first book sets up that the military is its own culture.
Yep,
it's its
absolutely.
own unique culture. It's not a subculture. The services are subcultures. Mm-hmm. The Navy, the Army, they're subcultures of the military. And that identity you develop when you're in the military stays with you for the rest of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's how you tie your shoes. I still, when I take off my shoes, I'll tie them back up in a bow because I was taught you put your shoes and clothes away like you're wearing them in basic training. And it drives my wife crazy. And so just little things like that stay with you. I can't walk around with my jacket unzipped or only one button. I got to button them all up. And they go, what are you buttoning all your jacket? I said, well, because in the military, your uniform, you button all the buttons. You don't leave the last button undone. And so these things just stick with me. And these are little things that you can notice about other veterans sometimes. Like, you're a veteran. I can tell by the way you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That culture.
Yeah, it's funny you say it because even I tried to let my hair grow. Of course, I don't have no hair no more, but I tried to let my hair grow, and it got on my ears. I said, I can't stand it. I got to cut that hair. I got to get on my hair. So
my wife, so I still need a haircut, big time right now. Because you don't need a haircut. You did grow your hair out. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Hey, Professor Castro, I know you both wrote this book about life in the Army, and you make a distinction specifically about soldiers not at war. We talked about it, not at war, but preparing for the next war. Would you talk about that? I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit, maybe a little bit more about that.
Well, one of the things we always say, I always learned, if you're not at war, you're preparing for war.
Yep.
Those are the two states you're in. And sometimes soldiers today don't understand that. They think, well, we're not at war. Why do we take things so seriously? And sort of implied is that there should be one standard when you're at war and then another standard when you're not at war. And we talk about this in the book. We say, look, soldiers struggle to understand one standard. We can't have two. Let's just have one standard. And one of our favorite sayings that Anthony and I have, and then Anthony, you jump in, is like, we say every time you ignore a deficiency, you've set a new standard. And we go through life like that, talking to civilians that way, and they don't get it because civilians are used to having bad behavior overlooked or not called out. And so if a veteran calls out bad behavior, sometimes you're considered aggressive and not being a team player, embarrassing people. And there are ways to do that, of course. And we're all in that. So I'm still transitioning in that phase of my life is, like just letting little things go. But then I'm always like, I'm setting a new standard, though. Is that the new standard I want to set? So we're always sort of, what would be acceptable in the Army? And then that sort of just permeates our thinking. So Anthony, jump in.
I was just going to, go ahead, sir. Dr. Hassan, go ahead, sir.
I was going back to the culture piece because that's kind of where my head was going with this was, we are a culture and we are different. And if you think about the family you grew up in, there were artifacts in your house that represented who your family was. There were visible things that you had surrounding you to remind you of your family's values. There were unspoken rules in your family, like you don't talk at the dinner table or you don't talk back to your parents. Well, in the military, the reason why our culture has endured all these years, and while Carl and I look at these young soldiers, we still see ourselves because the culture doesn't change. The culture is set in the way it is because of the things that we have done to make it sure that it does. The uniform still tells the story of who you are and what you've done. The combat patches tell you where you've been and how long you spent there. The base has all the things, the flagpole, it has the headquarters building, it has the chapel. But we also have these unspoken rules that people in the civilian world sometimes don't understand, like why do we stand up automatically when someone senior to us walks in the room? Why do we not ask a question even though the general asked, do you have any questions, right? So there's just things about us that will stay with us forever that we really have a hard time with when we enter into the civilian world, because as Carl is reminding me, it feels like you're a foreigner.
It is.
Going into a new country. I mean, drop someone in China and say, okay, go to work, find a place for your family to live. That's how it sometimes feels for these soldiers. And they are telling us about how scared they are about coming back into a community they don't know anything about. It's like, what do I wear to work? How do I talk? Can I say that? Will they appreciate who I am and what I bring? What's my identity now? I mean, a sergeant major like yourself, commanding all of the Army, and now you're a civilian. Now what? A 4-star general has private planes and cooks and butlers and drivers, and the next day, who are they and what do they have? So I think all of that compounds this experience that we have as we traverse through the military culture and we move our way into civilian culture, and sometimes it's a struggle.
Yeah, I got to tell you a funny story. You made me think of it just a second ago. I don't know if you knew who General Zinni is, Anthony Zinni. When he was a CENTCOM commander, I was his sergeant major. And so when I got to be a sergeant major in the Army, I came back for his change of command when he was retiring. And I went to his change of command. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And he told me something so funny. He says, Sergeant Major, I haven't driven a car in probably 15 years. He said, and I'm not necessarily sure how I'm getting home today. I said, oh my goodness. And one more story there, General Shinseki, same thing. I was getting out of the service. I've been out for a while, and I was talking to him where he's getting out, and I was talking to him, and he asked me one day, he said, Sergeant Major? I said, yes, sir. He said, you know anything about those e-tickets? And he never got his own ticket. So it's little funny things like that we take for granted sometimes that those guys don't know anything about. Hey, I want to dig a little bit deeper by exploring the unique culture of the Army, but first, there's always a first in everything we do. We need to take a quick break, so stay with me. I love this conversation. Stay with me. We'll be right back. This is Your Next Mission video podcast with me, your host, Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major. If you're enjoying this, and you've got to be enjoying this, because we're having a great time talking about how we take care of our service members. Please like us, click on that subscribe button below, and be sure to click on the bell to receive notifications of all of our upcoming video podcast releases. I'll be right back after word from our presenting sponsors.
You're watching Your Next Mission video podcast, proudly presented by Navy Federal Credit Union, the most trusted credit union owned by members of the military community, serving all branches of the armed forces and their families. Their members are the mission. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. And Purdue Global. You're ready for a comeback, and with Purdue Global, you can do more than take classes. You can take charge of your story, of your career, of your life. Earn a degree you can be proud of and get an education employers respect. Start your comeback at PurdueGlobal.edu. Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack L. Tilley.
Welcome back. We're talking with authors of Boys in the Barracks, Dr. Anthony M. Hassan, President and CEO of the Cohen Veterans Network, and Professor Carl A. Castro, Director of Military and Veterans Programs at the School of Social Work at the University of Southern California. Before we jump back into our discussion, I'd like to take a few seconds to tell you about a new program we are excited about and called Your Next Mission VCS, a Veterans Community Support Program. We'll provide personalized one-on-one support and address the unique needs within our veteran community through our many partnerships with other organizations and services. Please check us out on yournextmission.org/VCS and register to participate today. Remember, we want to help you with whatever your issues are with you and your family are facing. So please reach out to us. Dr. Hassan, in the book, you explore the unique culture of the Army, which is, in its own tradition, unspoken rules. Do you want to explore that culture just a little bit more and be more specific about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so strong, and the language, our language is unique. The humor of our service is unique. The acronyms we use are unique. So language is a driving force. Those things that we celebrate, parades, change of command, special moments in our lives when we get awards and recognition and promotion, and all of that makes up who we are. And that's why we're a culture. That's why it's a strong culture. That's why it never changes. Or if it does, it changes very little, which is good. It's good because we can have it as a long tradition and a long-standing focus area for us, that when you join the military, you know what to expect. You know how to act. You know how to carry yourself. You know what to say, what not to say. And it's a great environment if you need structure and you want structure. And it's what makes us a great military. So I'm all in. Like I mentioned earlier, it's the things that are unspoken, like you can't have certain relationships in the military. You need to respect your officers and salute them when you see them. You need to stand at parade rest when you see your senior NCOs coming through. You need to stand up when someone walks in the room that outranks you. I think those are things that are all ingrained in us. And to this day, I have a hard time when the boss walks in not to stand up.
Yeah.
And that's something that was ingrained in us. You stand up, you look someone in the eye, you shake their hand, or you provide a good salute. So I think the military is a unique culture. I think it's great. I think one thing about our culture, though, that hurts us in some ways, but I think preserves it, is that we have this separation with civilian communities. I remember as an NCO, if you were hanging around with civilians off duty, I thought terrible things about you. I thought you probably were doing drugs. I probably thought you were doing things you shouldn't be doing. You were staying out too late. That's why you were late for PT formation. So I had all of these thoughts, but we do create a clear separation between us and them. And that causes a problem. I mean, you literally can sit on a military base and have everything there for you, and you never need to leave. And I think that tightness, that closeness really makes it hard for when we walk out and take off the uniform and we walk into civilian communities. We really don't know them and they don't know us. And so I'll leave it at that. But we create that. I, as an NCO, created that. I didn't want you talking to anyone outside of the military. I didn't want you hanging around with civilians. I wanted you to be focused 100% on the job.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think the other thing, and I've talked to the Department of the Army about this a couple of times, I think we ought to start putting things like that into our educational system. We ought to talk to people about what transition is going to be like when you get out of the service and how you're going to have to find your tribe and fit in and all that stuff. And we just don't do that. There's the old saying, I'm sure you've heard it before, don't let the door hit you in the backside when you get out of there. And, a couple of years later, they can't even speak your name. But that's important for us to start telling people, because that's why when you look at the people that take their life by suicide, the homelessness, incarceration, I mean, all those things are associated with your culture when you get out about not fitting in. Professor Castro, you want to add anything to it, sir?
The only thing I will add is not only do we create this divide, we tell soldiers that they are better than civilians.
We do that, absolutely.
Raise your hand. You are serving your country. You're defending your countries. These civilian dirtbags are too lazy and too selfish to do it. You are better than they are. And then, oh, by the way, when you get out, you're going to be working for them. And so there's always this hopping around trying to find a supervisor you can relate to, because who wants to work for somebody when you think you're better than they are? So we don't do that on purpose, the making the transition difficult. but it sets in our mind and our identity. I served, I sacrificed, you did nothing except enjoy the sacrifices that I made. And and so there's a bit of this underlying resentment. There's the old saying, they say freedom isn't free. It is for most Americans. Most
Yeah.
Americans have never served. It's completely free for them. For those who
Yeah.
have served, many have paid the ultimate price, but some have sacrificed their health, their family. It wasn't free for them. But when people say freedom's not free, I say, well, I think the last time I looked, it's free for about 97% of them,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. So, yeah, it's free. And it's why we struggle. If I think I've sacrificed and you haven't, then there's going to be some friction. And so it's kind of like just appreciating your sacrifices you've done for the good of the country, not in an expectation of it being reciprocated. Now, if it is reciprocated, that's great. If it's not, just kind of let it go and not react inappropriately. Let me say it that way.
Yeah, it's funny you said there's a bunch of things you said. I absolutely love what both of you are saying. One of the things I remember is a sergeant saying, "Don't trust those civilians down there. When you go buy a car, they're going to take advantage of it." So I'm one of those guys. I'm sure you was too, saying the same thing. Yeah. The other thing, I think there has to be a better way nationally to educate our country about the military. During the draft, when they had a draft, everybody had to come in. Not everybody came in, but a lot of people came into service, and it was better for it when they left. But now we don't have that. We have people that come in that volunteer to come in, so we don't have as many people that really fully understand the military. I tell recruiting command or anybody to listen to me that Middle America doesn't know anything about the military. The large communities in our country don't know much about the military. They only know, I can't remember all, they know by listening to television, listening to radio. The internet, of course, is a big one now. I guess I'm sure there's a couple more in there, but it's just all word of mouth about the military. They don't learn much. They don't learn much about it. So it's amazing. But we got to do. That's why this book is important. And if you guys are listening on the show today, it's important to get a copy of this book and read it. Understand the kind of sacrifices our veterans, our young men and women make for all of us. Professor Castro, you have a chapter in the book dedicated to the soldier's relationship, which you say are complex, nuanced, and regulated. What do you learn about soldiers' relationships and how they influence their experience in the service?
Most of this, Anthony has already mentioned. As we know, we have very strong rules against who you can date, who you can't date, who you can marry, who you can't marry, who you can do a business deal with, who you can't do a business deal with. How we speak to each other is based on rank, and so a lot of civilians struggle with this concept of what difference does it make what two consenting adults want to do. And I said, first you got to just set that aside. The military is very concerned about what two consenting adults will do, especially if one's an officer and one's an enlisted.
Absolutely.
One's a sergeant major and one's a specialist. And so this is one of the culture differences, that with rank comes increased responsibility. Oftentimes, soldiers only think about the privileges that rank gives. And oftentimes people only want to get rank to get those privileges. So one of the things that we talk about in the book is you only have rank so you can take on more responsibility, not so you get more privileges. You do get a few privileges, but it's for the responsibility. And one of those responsibilities is maintaining good order and discipline. And without good order and discipline, as we all know, the military would collapse. And relationships can disrupt good order and discipline. And so we talk about how that works in the Army in a very concrete way, not so people necessarily agree with the rules of the Army, but at least they understand where they come from. Most of the rules we have in the Army have a purpose. Oftentimes we just don't do a good job explaining why they're necessary. And we'll be the first ones to tell you, Anthony and I, if there's a rule that doesn't make any sense, let's get rid of it. We got enough rules. And, but when rules do make sense, we need to educate, explain why they make sense so people say, I get it now. I wish somebody had explained that to me before that way. So
I'm going to I'm going to ask you, Dr. Hassan, to talk about it in a minute, but I'm going to tell you a story. When I was in the Army, when I was sergeant major in the Army, they came out with this rule that, and you just said it a minute ago, sir, is that enlisted can't marry officers. And they said, well, it was an Air Force policy, in fact. And they said, well, we're going to make it an Army policy. I said, no, let's not do that. And the guy said, why? I said, well, because one thing, what you're going to do is make some young enlisted soldier or an officer lie, because they're going to do it. We can't stop them, right? So don't make rules you can't enforce, and that was crazy. Dr. Hassan, you want to add anything to that? Because this is a great discussion, great point to all the points you made right there.
No, I think it's, again, part of the culture, and there are some parts of it that people can take advantage of, and we don't necessarily get into this, but maybe in our next book we will. The military sexual trauma, right? Young private female comes to the dorms or to the barracks. E5's in the barracks. Great opportunity. Let's go drink. She's underage. She shouldn't be fraternizing with him. They go out, they drink, and things happen. And then we have allegations and we have problems. So we need to understand how these relationships work. And these young soldiers need to understand them too. And it's just unfortunate. As a mental health guy, we've seen so many of these cases. And I don't always want to talk about the bad parts, but it's part of rank. It's a part of the relationships. And unfortunately, some people take advantage of their rank. And that's how we have some of the situations we have today with alcohol-related incidents, underage drinking, people put in compromising positions. Can't report necessarily because they were junior, they shouldn't have been fraternizing, or vice versa. So, it's just the reality of our work environment. And, and it's another thing about the military is the difference. You do something like this, you're going to go to jail.
Yeah.
You're going to spend time in jail. If you shoplift at the BX or PX, you can go to jail. You can lose your career. You can have a dishonorable discharge. So, a civilian could steal from Walmart and no one will know about it. They'll get a fine, they'll get a misdemeanor, but they'll be fine. But you do something in the military outside of the rules and regulations, it's going to impact your life for a long time, if not forever. So I think people need to appreciate we have these rules. We do these in order to have good order and discipline, in order to go fight the wars and for people to do things that we're going to ask them to do. And it all makes sense to us. But I don't think it makes sense to others who are not in our culture. And so I just throw that out there because that is something that, unfortunately, as a mental health guy, I was brought into many of these situations where this issue came up.
No, sir, I agree 100%. I can think of a couple of instances. I'm really an outgoing kind of guy. When I was in the Army, I was always out dealing with stuff, and I always told everybody, everybody has a sergeant. It's like everybody's got a lieutenant. And if you see something wrong, correct it. Don't bypass it. Don't ignore it. Fix it. Fix the problem, because if you don't, and sir, Dr. Hassan, you already said it, if you don't, you start a new standard. You have a new standard there. But I was in Bosnia, and I was going around, it was when all the sexual harassment was coming out in the military. And so me and the general was talking, so I'd go around and I'd talk to a group of females, and I had a couple of females there. And the one sergeant, maybe a private, a PFC. And I said, have you guys ever been, sexually harassed or anything like that? And the sergeant, you know what she said? She said, if they mess me, I'll knock them out, and all this stuff. And the young soldier immediately started crying, right? And she couldn't talk. She just turned around and walked away. And so I said to the sergeant, I said, hey, look, I said, she's one of your members of your squad or whatever. I don't know how much you know her, but I want you to go find out what her issue is. And I called the brigade sergeant major and say, here's a young lady's name or a young soldier's name. I want you to go check this out. Anyway, get to the bottom line here. What had happened is, sir, just exactly what you said. Her sergeant got her drunk and took advantage of her before they ever deployed. And so we did the appropriate thing. We court-martialed him and put him out of the service. Which is the right thing to do. And I think the problem is people know what's going on, they don't do anything about it. If you see a problem, and the people are listening, if you see a problem, fix it. If you see a problem that our service member has a problem, talk to them, listen to them, hear their stories, try to help them as much as you can. First of all, you got me so pumped up. I wish I'd go back in uniform right now. It may not fit, but I'll go back in uniform. This is a great discussion. I just have a couple more questions, but first we need to take a quick break. And I know you're not going to go anywhere. You're good Air Force soldier. We're good soldiers together. Don't go anywhere. Now here's a word from two more of the organizations that make this show possible.
You're watching Your Next Mission video podcast, brought to you in part by Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Dental, Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Vision.
Part of transitioning out is that dental and vision insurance breaks off from your medical insurance.
Vision and dental is very important to be able to enjoy your retirement.
Blue Cross Blue Shield makes the transition so much easier.
And USAA.
A promise is a trust not to be broken, whether spoken with an oath or sealed with a pinky. And after 100 years, we're still taking care of the military community and their families. That's our mission, always.
Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack L. Tilley.
Welcome back. We're blessed to be here today with the authors of Boys in the Barracks, Dr. Anthony M. Hassan from Cohen Veteran Network and Professor Carl A. Castro from the University of Southern California. Remember, this is your show. It's not my show. It's your show. We want to know if there's any issues that directly affect you, and we want to address those issues, each and every one of them. So please, as I've said before, reach out to me. Tell me what topics you'd like us to cover. Remember, it's your show. It's not mine. You can call or text me at 844-424-1134, or send me an email at SMA Tilley at yournextmission.org, and I'll actually reach back out to you. Dr. Hassan, I'll put you in the hot water, in the hot seat now. Here we go. Dr. Hassan, in this chapter about mental health, and we talked about it already, mental health and the stigma, which is subject dear to my heart. Would you talk about the paradox that exists about that stigma?
Yeah, Carl and I talked a lot about this as well, and we've written other papers about it. The idea is that, our senior NCOs, obviously experienced a lot of the war trauma and the war experiences, and they have family problems and other life problems, but yet they carry on and they don't seek help because they feel like, they can't get help or shouldn't get help, and they need to be strong and stoic. And I think the paradox is that they're hurting and they're injured, but at the same time, they expect everybody else to be strong and not ask for help and stay focused on the mission. So, it's really sad because they're not allowing the juniors enlisted to go seek help because they're sending the message that, hey, look, I've been there, done that, and I'm fine, so you should be fine too. And we know this to be true because we're hearing young soldiers telling us it's true. They're still telling us today, just like they told us 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Don't go to mental health. You're crazy. You're not crazy. You can't go to mental health. You need to be here. That's for the weak. There was a colleague of Carl and I who wrote a book, and he mentioned in his book that even a few years ago at Fort Carson, one of the platoon sergeants had a private carrying a pink rock with him to go to mental health, as if going to mental health is for the weak.
Oh, man.
And this is crazy. This is
crazy.
This is now. In the book, we have soldiers who will tell you they wouldn't dare go to mental health. But then there's some that say, well, I will go because I don't really care. But the majority of them are afraid to go. They're afraid to look weak. The same thing is true with physical health. I remember we used to make guys stand in crutches for an hour while we went to do PT and come back because they couldn't participate, but they surely weren't going to have a free hour. Mm-hmm. So this stigma around being healthy, being physically fit, people can't be overweight, so you can't be weak, you can't be frail, you have to be strong and capable. And the problem is our NCOs expect everybody to be just like them, and that's just not the case. And that's why we have so many folks suffering in silence. We're not getting the most productivity from them. but I get it. I was there. I was on the other side. I was that NCO that, didn't want you to go to mental health, right? You needed to be strong. You were the weak guy if you had to go. And if you had to go, you couldn't go to the field. If you didn't go to the field, if you didn't deploy, oh, wow, now you're really useless. And so you must be feigning these symptoms because you don't want to go. And so this, again, is the culture that perpetuates this myth that going to mental health is wrong or bad. So I was a mental health officer. I dealt with it the whole time I was there, doing mental health, 14 years in the Air Force, seeing Army, Air Force, all of them. They didn't come to me unless they had a problem. They didn't come to me unless they had domestic violence. They didn't come to me unless they had substance abuse problems. They didn't come to me unless they came to work with alcohol on their breath. They only came to me when the problem presented itself. And by then, the problem was so bad that many of them did end up getting sent out of the military because they waited too long. But when your NCOs, the ones that you trust and you follow, are basically making you feel like it's the wrong thing to do, then you're not going to go. And if there are a bunch of NCOs listening to this right now, they know exactly what I'm saying because they continue to perpetuate it.
Yeah.
Very rarely is there someone who's saying, go get help. And oh, by the way, when the Sergeant Major of the Army says, hey, I went and got help, or the General says I went and got help, we think that works. The truth is, if your sergeant, if your platoon sergeant, your squad leader isn't telling you that, you're not listening to that senior person.
Yeah.
You're listening to that squad leader who's telling you you're weak, you're not one of us. That's the problem we got to beat. And
yeah,
we can't. We have.
Maybe I'm different than a lot of people, and I hope I am anyway. But I grew up as a poor kid. I didn't have anything. I tell people all the time, the last 2.5 years of my life, I lived in a laundry room, just big enough to pick my feet up and close the door, and had a little cord to turn my light on, and 3 shelves I put my clothes on, a little vent I looked at it. So I was poor. I didn't have anything. And so as I progressed through the ranks, and I ran into people like that, I knew one thing I needed to do is talk to them and listen to them. And if they had problems and I didn't fix it, that problem's not going to go away. So send them out, get it fixed, and they'll come back a better person, a better soldier, a better airman. They'll come back just a better person. And the other thing I'll tell you, they know if you care. If you don't care, they don't care. But our professions are not a joke. It's about protect and defend the Constitution. And I can't go to war with nobody that's not prepared. And if you're not prepared and I'm doing something wrong, tell me about it. But I agree with you 100%. The only way to get the best out of your soldiers or servicemen or airmen or whatever is to let them listen to them, talk to them, see what's wrong, and fix the issues. And that's important. Last thing, I'll sort of get off this. I think there's probably a bubble in the Army because we was at war somewhat. I think we're good war fighters, but we're not good garrison people. We're talking about that too, but we're not necessarily good garrison, how you doing, what's going on. And we need to go back and doing that. We need to talk more about those kind of things that make you a good leader in the future, because I guarantee you, when you get to our age, you'll look back and say, man, I know I messed that stuff up. And I wish I'd have made it a little bit better. Professor Castro, how about yourself? You want to add anything? This is a great discussion for anybody to listen to. Professor, I'm pumped. I'll probably jump out of this chair. Go ahead.
The only thing that I want to really add is leaders should never forget that there is stress in garrison.
Oh, yeah.
It's not combat stress, but it's stress. There's sexual traumas. There are deaths by suicide. There are training accidents. There are training injuries. And there's all of these hey you taskings that happen in garrison. And that all of that takes sort of a cumulative toll. The daily stressors, the daily hassles, the lack of planning in garrison, the sitting around in the motor pool for hours on end waiting for a task to come in. And then when it's almost time to leave, you get 20 tasks and you can't leave until they're done. That is the kind of thing that's so frustrating to soldiers. And this is in the book. You could read about how they think about it and how they responded. But as NCOs, I just say, look, if you don't have any tasks for your soldiers, let them go. Don't make them just be there to be there. Be there to be, so somebody may ask me where they're at, and I don't want to be the NCO said I let them go early. What do you mean let them go early? I got all these tasks to be done, right? Those kinds of things. And In the book, we talk about when you try to find out where do all these last minute taskings come in. When I was in the military, we did a systematic study. We talked to a bunch of soldiers, and they all blamed the first sergeant company commander. So we went and talked to a bunch of first sergeant company commanders, and they blamed the battalion. So we went and talked to a bunch of battalion sergeant majors.
You're going to blame somebody else.
This is going, they blamed the brigade. Brigade blamed division. Division blamed Corps. Corps blamed the Army and DOD. It just never stopped. But at some point, one of these leaders in this long chain of command has to be responsible. It can't always be somebody else's fault. And if you think it is, to say, okay, I'm taking responsibility then, you're going. And, because garrison is the time to get mental health care. And garrison is the time to get physical health injuries taken care of. If you got a bad back, a bad knee, a bad shoulder, that's the time to do that. Not when you're getting ready to go to war, because then it looks like you're just trying to get out of going to war, but really you've just put off all of these physical and mental health challenges to the last minute. You say, geez, I can't go with knees like this and a back like this, and you're just trying to get out. You're a coward. What you joined for? So then all of a sudden we start making these negative aspirations. So garrison is the time to get healthy. That's the time to do it. Not when you're at war, but before you go. So again, if you're not at war, you're preparing to go. So what are those things you need to do? Get your health right. Get your family right. Get your relationships in place. So I'll stop there because I could go on and on about this, but garrison is the time to do that.
Well, it's really funny because I guess this was you guys talk. I must have been a pretty good platoon sergeant, a first sergeant, because I let me tell you what I used to do. I was in a tank unit. And I guess I had 20 people in the formation or something like that. And I remember going up. First sergeant would always have a meeting at 1630 or 1600 or something like that. And so I was probably platoon sergeant for probably a week. And I realized something real quick. He never really put out anything that really was that important at the end of the day. If he did, he'd tell me earlier. So what I did, when I went in there, I'd sit at the first chair next to the door. And when I went in to sit down, I'd always say, First Sergeant, you got anything hot I got to put out to the guys today or the soldiers today before we get, no, Tilley, I don't have nothing like that. And I'd open the door and go like that and close the door. And they'd go home. and so all these other platoon sergeants, they started, raising hell about the fact, hey, you're letting your guys go early. Well, I'm not letting them go early. And I didn't tell them for probably a month or so. And finally one day I said, well, look, let me tell you what I'm doing. And then they fought to sit in that chair. Everybody, they let them go. So, yeah, there's ways to get around it. I just say, hey, First Sergeant, you got anything? Let them go. Don't make them stay.
Because you're wasting their time. You became the sergeant major of the Army. There's a reason for that, right? Well, there's a reason for that.
Well, I think that was just pure luck. Hey, you both interviewed over 150 soldiers for this book, and you both served in the Army and the Air Force. Given your own Army experience and Air Force, what were you most surprised about to learn about other experiences as you were researching and writing this book? And I think we probably covered a lot of them. But Professor Castro, I'm going to talk to you first. What did really come out of that investigation of those 150 soldiers that really stands out more than anything else?
Well, I will share a personal story or maybe a personal experience. My wife thinks I have an off humor. She thinks my humor is not very funny. Some people would say my humor is perverted. And for a long time, and I learned this in basic training. But one of the things I learned from all these interviews, when you talk to soldiers about humor, yeah, we do. We all have a perverted sense of humor. So I felt like I had a community to go to. So
yeah, sure.
I only
we
say
understand
certain things and tell certain jokes around certain people. And I always tell my wife, I know you might not think this is funny, but I know a whole organization who'd find this hilarious. So that's the thing that I took away the most personally. Obviously, I learned a lot, and how much I still love soldiers and how valuable they are, and how we still need to continue to work to make their lives better while they're serving, and then as they transition out.
Yeah.
So, Anthony.
Yeah. There you go. Dr. Hassan, how about yourself, sir?
Yeah, no, I guess I was reminded about how strong our culture is, that it continues to be very similar to what it was when Carl and I were young enlisted guys 40 years ago. And I think that's great. And I also think that there's still the same flaws that we need to work on. And it's helping guys transition. It's helping us
Yeah.
connect more with the civilian community and getting soldiers prepared. But the truth is that we're mission oriented, and the mission that you have until the day you leave is to prepare for war. So I get that part too. I think we're in good hands. I think the young soldiers we interviewed all have the same hopes and wishes and dreams that we had. I think many of them are going to satisfy those hopes, dreams, and wishes. I've seen so many young folks who came from where we came from very little, who now have a better place in the world, have a better lot in life, have a family that they can take care of, the ability to be a parent alongside a spouse, to not have to be a single parent, to be able to give your kids a middle class lifestyle, to be able to travel the world. And so it was very, very comforting to know that we're still in good hands. The military gave me everything. I mean, everything. And so, Carl and I will tell you, at the end of the book, there's no better place to grow, to be a leader, to make life better for your family than to join the military. And as much negative as we talk about in the book, and as much that someone might interpret as terrible, there's so much good. And we're great examples of that good. I went from a high school dropout to a GED, to an associate's, to a bachelor's, to a master's, to a PhD, enlisted, to officer, and to where I am today, all because of the Army.
I tell you what, there's a lot of people. I haven't talked to anybody that hadn't did the same thing. There's a lot of people that went in just sort of struggling and came out and is in a better place now. So, well, God, you guys are so fun. And thank you for what you're doing there. It just makes me feel good to talk to people that feel the same way I feel and really are successful in life and doing a lot to help our veteran community. Now, I understand all the profits from the book go to support the work that on behalf of the active duty service members, veterans, military families, and the Cohen Veteran Network. And how can someone purchase Boys in the Barracks book? Is there a website or something they go to? Either one, Dr. Hassan, you want to answer that, sir?
Yeah, I mean, the book is available on Amazon.com. Just go to Amazon Books and type in Boys in Barracks. All proceeds go to Cohen Veterans Network, so we can do more good and provide more mental health care. We also have a website. I think it's boysinthebarracks.com. You can find some merchandise there. We still need to build it out a little bit more. But no, anybody can go buy the book on Amazon. It's there. We'd love for you to put a review up too, because what's important for this book to get elevated so we can get more people to see it, especially civilians, is for people to write reviews about the book on Amazon.
Yeah. Well, that's
And if you ever see me anywhere and you have a copy, grab me. I'm happy to sign it.
Well, I was just going to say, if I buy a copy, will you sign it for me?
As my wife jokingly tells me, she was watching this show on TV. She said, "Oh, my husband wrote a book and he signed every copy. So if you have an unsigned copy, it may be more valuable."
Hey, first of all, let me say thank you for what you're doing. You're making a difference, and it really, again, it makes me feel good that we have people like yourself, a lot of veterans out there doing all they can to help the veteran community and their families, and we're making a difference. I guarantee you we're making a difference. So, God bless you for what you're doing. Again, this is just a super discussion. You have any final thoughts, anything you want to share with the audience? Dr. Hassan, you can go first again. Sir, do you want to, anything you want to share? Anything we missed? Anything? This is your platform now. Go ahead and jump on us. Let's tell us something there.
No, I don't actually. I think my last statement was really what I wanted to say, is that, military is a place for many of us to improve our lot in life. And as much as we hate it, we love it. As much as it challenged us, we embraced it. The reason why we're having this conversation, we're laughing and we're talking, is because we're from the same culture.
That's right.
We know that life. We live that life. And I think that's what makes us brothers and sisters automatically. Yeah. And that's why this show is so good, and so much of it means a lot to us, and we're able to connect so easily. From the moment we started talking, we started laughing. That's the beautiful part about being a service member and being a veteran, is that we always have a home, always have a place. And Carl?
I just be proud of your service.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't serve in the Army, that's okay. You're part of the military.
Well, the other side.
It's part of your subculture, but be proud. And don't be afraid to tell people you serve. Don't
Absolutely.
be afraid to tell people. Be proud of your accomplishment. We always find when we talk to veterans, we've spoken to thousands of veterans, all of them, to a woman, to a man, are proud that they served,
Absolutely.
no matter what they experienced, and they think everybody else should serve too. So that tells you right there the organization is doing okay. Despite how we think things could improve, it's doing a pretty doggone job, and people are proud to serve.
I tell you the other thing that, just to add to what you guys are saying here, tell your story. Tell your story about the military. Tell your story to other people. And some people won't want to listen, some will listen, but tell your story about the good things that you did and how it allowed you to grow up. The other thing is, I always tell people, show your colors. Wear your hat every once in a while. Your Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine, I don't care. Wear your colors and tell. The other thing is we put this out a few months ago. On the 12th of every month, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, you get the connection now, 12th Sergeant Major. On the 12th of every month, call another service member, call another a soldier, airman, and check on your buddy. It's a buddy check. Because there's a lot of people out there struggling that need help, and we need to do all we can as a family. It's a small family. We need to do all we can as a family to help them all out. Not just the service member, but the families. But it's important for us to help them. One quick last story I'll tell you. I had a good friend here I guess it's probably over a year ago now, that it was a senior NCO that I knew pretty well, worked with me on a couple of occasions throughout my time in the military. And we was pretty close. We knew each other. And one day, his wife left. He let the dog out, went out in the woods, and took his life by suicide. And I think today, when I look back at that, what if I just did something, one thing, maybe called him and seen or checked on him and seeing how he's doing. So it's important. What you're doing is important, and hopefully what we're doing is important also. But thank you so much for coming on the show. It's uplifting. It makes me feel so good about somebody like yourself just doing all these great things. This has been a great discussion, and you give me a lot to think about. So thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major. If we could ever do anything to support you and your mission, let us know.
You're doing it right now. Absolutely. You're getting on and you're talking about the things we need to do to help our veteran community. God bless you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Bye.
Thanks again to Dr. Anthony Hassan and Professor Carl Castro for being with us today. You can see these two love what they're doing, and they want to help as many people as they can. I'm Jack Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, and you've been enjoying Your Next Mission video podcast. And thank you for joining us. Log on to our website at yournextmission.org and leave me a review. I always say I hope it's a good review, but if it's a bad one, I can take it. While you're there, you can visit our nonprofit and corporate partners who have jobs and services available that can assist you in your transition from the military. And check out our job board in partnership with Recruit Military, where you can search for a job that's just right for you. You can find a short video that will help fine-tune your search, and where you can also create your own personal profile. You can follow me. I never thought I'd ever said this. You can follow me on all social media pages: Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Rumble. And if you like what we're doing with Your Next Mission, please click on that subscribe button below. And don't forget to click on the bell to receive notifications about all of our upcoming video podcasts. Don't forget, we want to hear from you. Please leave me a message or send me a text at 844-424-1134, or send me an email at smatilley@yournextmission.org. Thanks again to Dr. Hassan and Professor Castro, authors of Boys in the Barracks, for joining us today. And I think they probably said it all. It's about relationships, about helping each other out. We live in a small community, but all of us struggle sometimes. You struggle, I struggle, but talk to each other, tell your story. And if somebody has a problem, make sure you send them to the right people. As a young sergeant, I used to think I knew everything. If you have a problem, sit down, I'll counsel you. But I don't know everything. And there's some things that I need to send to professionals. Remember, we're combat people. We go to war, we fight wars, and we can't go to wars if we have issues. So don't try to fix them. Don't ignore them because they don't get any better. Send them to the appropriate people. Let them sit down and talk. because I guarantee you, you have problems, I have problems, but all of them can be fixed by talking or working with the right people. So don't think you're alone. Again, we're all part of a family. Thanks for watching, and thanks to New Mind Studios, of course, our sponsors, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue Global, Blue Cross Blue Shield, FEP Dental, Blue Cross Blue Shield, FEP Vision, and USAA. We appreciate all you do for our military. And as always, see you on the high ground. Hooah!
You've been listening to Your Next Mission, brought to you by the American Freedom Foundation. Learn more by visiting yournextmission.org.